Welcome to episode 6 of Amazing People. Today I have Mr. Alex Streit. He is a software entrepreneur. And we're going to talk about everything from business to leadership to what it is to be a great employee and a great human. We're going to talk about tips for success and probably a good bit about science and technology. So with that being said, I'd like to welcome my guest. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm pleased to be here.
So to begin with, can we get a little bit about your background? I know you have some roots in Switzerland. You spent some time in Australia. What was that all about?
Yeah, you wouldn't expect this for someone who ended up doing what I did in life, but the first 6 years of my life were spent in a house that didn't have electricity and was built high in the Swiss Alps. It was probably built over 300 years ago, and the construction of it and the scene of it would be very non-modern technology. I mean, it was surrounded by fields and mountains.
I mean, besides the non-electricity part, that sounds pretty beautiful.
It was definitely a postcard moment, although interestingly enough, as a kid, you don't really realize that that's a postcard moment. I used to think that the picture of an ideal getaway would be a desert island with maybe some palm trees, and that's got to be the epitome of beautiful. Without realizing that if I looked out my back window, I would have what most people that live on those islands would have as a postcard. So it's interesting how your perspective is very much shaped by what you know. And then when I was approximately 6.5, my life changed pretty dramatically because my parents moved to the U.S., to the Midwest, and my father took a postdoctoral position at UIUC, which is up in Illinois, in Champaign-Urbana. And that university that's one of the research centers for where, NCSA, the National Center for Supercomputing Applications, that's where things like Mosaic and the modern World Wide Web was, very, very formative. And so I went from being surrounded by essentially a whole slew of animals and picturesque scenery
and no electricity.
And no electricity to suddenly there's space and rockets and computers and a completely altered perception of what is possible. And I think it heavily shaped how I viewed our potential as humans and what we could achieve. And I got hooked very, very quickly. So in just the short 2.5 years that I was there, I had a very strong change in understanding of what technology could do as far as affecting our lives. And I wanted to be sure that we did that for the good of humankind.
Mm-hmm. So where is USIIC?
UIUC.
Mm-hmm.
So UI is University of Illinois, and UC is Urbana-Champaign. It is about 2 hours drive south of Chicago, and it's a university town, maybe a population of 120,000 people or so, and it's basically focused on some agriculture, of course, but a lot of technology is there as well for the University of Illinois.
I've been enamored by technology since I was a kid, not from the standpoint of actually getting into computers. I like playing games on them and making Paint and Word documents and things like that. But I've always liked being on them since I was a kid. I was born in '92, so I was sort of part of that generation. In your perspective, what was it like? Where was computing at when you were growing up, and what have you seen that made you want to get into it in the position that you're in now? And then could you tell us about that?
Sure. I think computers in and of themselves don't really do anything. They're a platform that let us do something with them. And in that sense, I would like to view them as performance-enhancing tools. So really the essence of what we as humans want to do and who we want to be continue through that. But computers are like a performance enhancer. They allow us to multiply what we're capable of by computing parts that previously we would spend so long being bogged down in the minutiae of. And I'll talk a bit about that later on as well when I get onto more topics about productivity and these sorts of things. But one of the things that really attracted me about computers was that they freed us, or had the potential to free us, to think about other things. And it used to frustrate me that you would sit in a school classroom, rote learning facts and figures and memorizing times tables and these sorts of things, when I didn't feel like that was a productive use of human intelligence. I felt like these were things that, obviously, there's some side benefit to being able to do a times table really quickly in your head, but realistically, that's something a computer can do better than us. So we should not be focused on doing that. We should be focused on the things that humans are good at, which are the very things that computers struggle with. And that's creative thinking and critical decision making and all of these other things that we are exceptionally good at that computers are not. So when I was growing up and dealing with computers, I saw them as having this potential to being kind of a multiplier effect for our ability to achieve things, but that often they would become complex in and of themselves. And so people would end up, and I saw this a lot with software development and other things, getting so entangled in computing for the sake of computing that we would invent this complexity that wasn't necessarily useful, exactly. Right. And so that was one of the things that attracted me into then going on into entrepreneurship in a software space. Was I felt that we could really take computers and we could harness them for the benefit of simplifying and improving and creating elegance. An elegance that allowed us as humans to then focus on what I believe to be the things that we are good at and take away some of the minutiae. And anyone who's used a lot of the modern enterprise software platforms can relate to just the crunching of numbers and clicking of buttons that just seem eternally never-ending in order to do the most mundane of tasks. And that is, unfortunately, the wrong approach. I think that is what we need to try to get away from.